Afternoon. So my name is Malik Moore, and I'm a principal of a Hilltop, high-performing school in Hilltop, Columbus Preparatory Academy. And I also live in Hilltop as well as working there. And so I'm not unfamiliar with hearing gunshots at night in my neighborhood. And I think it's easy for us to think that we need to turn to the police and the criminal justice system to make the things that are happening in my neighborhood right, to make us feel safe. But I think we all really know that we can't arrest ourselves out of this situation. What we're witnessing is young people crying out for belonging and a sense of community. And many of these kids are actually traumatized. They've experienced things that so many of us have only heard about. I want to go further to say that some of us live in communities that are still suffering from many of the tough on crime legislation acts. And so our kids may not even have exposure to adults that get up and go to work every day. And I'm not saying this is any fault of the people who live in their neighborhood. I'm not saying that they're not trying, that there's a lack of effort on their part. But there's so many good people that have been held back for 20 and 30 years for mistakes they made when they were just growing and developing. I want to remind us that as we look at the situation of youth violence right now, our youth need us. They need love, they need support, and they need access. There's so many good programs we have in our city, and there's so many signs of there being a prosperous future. And sadly, many of our young people aren't able to read the signals or understand that these opportunities are there for them. I don't even know if the younger version of myself was able to make that connection. Mentors, coaches, community center directors, they do yeoman's work. Teachers, principals, yeoman's work. Meeting these kids where they are. Pastor Paul V. Clark was the man who reached back and helped the younger me. He taught me how to eat at a restaurant with linen tablecloths. He taught me how to walk into a restaurant and look at the shopkeeper in the eye and shake their hand. He taught me so many hard and soft life skills, but he saw something in the future me that I didn't even know I had at that time. And so I think it's important that we remind ourselves as we meet these young people where they are, when we meet them how they are, and we see them as their future selves, that they know that when they see us as their neighbors, as the adults in their lives, they know that we're there to support them. And I think through that act, we create safety, we create belonging, and we give them an opportunity to see a future with them in it. And so again, had it not been for the people that saw the future me before I did, had it not been the intentional efforts that were given to me, I might not have hope. I might have given up. I might have listened to the people that were willing to accept me for who I was at that moment and not push me to become a better version of myself. We know who these people are and how easy it is for them to accept these young, impressionable people in our communities. In closing, I want to share a quote by Dr. Cornel West that reminds us that true justice is what love looks like in public. And so each of the acts of violence we're witnessing, to me, are merely tragic expressions of unmet needs. We have to all come together. We have to address systems of inequity. We have to address trauma and support our young people as we challenge them. We have to publicly love our youth through this process. Thank you. And so at this time, I'm very honored to bring forward to the dais our city's leader, our city's mayor, Mayor Andy Ginther.
Thank you, Malik, for those comments and for all that you do in our community. To Councilmember Mitch Brown, who's joined us virtually, to Police Commander Smith Ware and Jeffrey, Marion Stuckey from Columbus Public Health, Pastor Alyssa Graves from Central City Church. Many people thought that when we turned the page on 2020, we turned the page on violent crime that plagued our city. But the causes of the spike in violent crime haven't changed. And sadly, we're again seeing a record pace for homicides in our city. Columbus is not alone in this trend. Small, large, and mid-sized cities are experiencing the same. Indianapolis has already had 44 homicides this year. Louisville, 32, and is now in its 13th consecutive month of double-digit homicides. Nashville has so far had 24 homicides, double the number from the same time last year. I'd stress again that we're not talking about numbers here. We're talking about people. And each person killed leaves behind a family, friends, and a gap in our neighborhoods. It has to stop. The solutions aren't simple. There's not one single set path, but we are committed to doing everything we can to end the violence we're experiencing today. In 2017, Columbus experienced its highest number of homicides in the city's history. To find a solution, I held a series of small group meetings with members of the community and law enforcement. And from that, the Comprehensive Neighborhood Safety Strategy was born. The Comprehensive Neighborhood Safety Strategy takes a broad-based approach to safety by engaging law enforcement as well as other city departments, businesses, the community, and faith leaders. Because of this strategy, homicides dropped 28% in 2018 and 33% in 2019. Sadly, in 2020, Columbus set a new, tragically high level with 175 homicides. While the Comprehensive Neighborhood Safety Strategy worked, the current spike in homicides and other violent crimes that happened for different reasons in 2017. The violence we're seeing is different, and it's primarily related to the global pandemic and economic crisis it's brought around the world and to cities around the country. COVID-19 thrust many residents into crisis with housing and food insecurity, lack of consistent in-person education, and the closing of many of the safety nets so many residents rely on, from libraries to recreation centers. Desperation, frustration, and anger have led to much of the crime we're seeing now. We need to address the new causes of violence by adapting the current strategies and adding new ones. Since the beginning of the year, I've been meeting with small groups, community members, faith leaders, law enforcement, high school students. And I've asked them what they need to feel safe in their neighborhoods. I'm grateful to all of them for their candor in speaking with me. Today, we are announcing plans that came from those conversations. But let me be clear, this is just the start. As the year progresses, we will continue to adjust based on results we see and information and data from our neighborhoods. And we'll bring on new programs to continue this battle for neighborhood safety. First, let's talk about new initiatives. Through the new Salem Community Development Corporation and at the recommendation of the Men of Linden, who I met with on a couple of different occasions, we're investing in Growing Up, an initiative that provides comprehensive education, development, and employment that's focused on young men from the Linden community who need stable jobs so they can raise a family and contribute to the community. The program consists of recruitment of participants, life coaching, education, soft skill development, employment, and mentoring from the Men of Linden. We anticipate reaching 30 young men through a pilot and expand this program over the next couple of years to serve even more. Next, we're enlisting End the Violence, a program by 2 former gang members to assist youth and young adults in maneuvering their lives away from crime. Councilmember Mitch Brown is with us virtually, and he'll explain more about the program, expecting to serve about 85 of our neighbors. On Friday, I met with the Central Ohio Mayors and City Managers Association and presented them with a call to action. Specifically, I asked them to work with me, juvenile judges, and other leaders in the community to find diversion programs that work for our youth. Young people who commit violent crimes must be held accountable. But interventions for youth that commit lower-level crimes can stop them from moving on to violent crimes. I've already had positive conversations with some of the judges who are on board with this work, and in the coming weeks, I will convene judges, mayors, and law enforcement to discuss our path moving forward, focusing on neighborhood safety and data-driven, evidence-based diversion and intervention programs that can help keep our young people safe. The city is ready to make a significant investment to get these diversion and intervention programs up and running and improve neighborhood safety throughout the community. We have some initiatives that are already producing results, and today I want to announce their expansion. Last summer, we rolled out the Reroute program. These are micro-interventions for at-risk young people and their families with a coordinated response from law enforcement, Columbus Public Health, and Recreation and Parks. This program reaches out to at-risk youth and their families to provide services to address housing and food insecurity, education issues, grief counseling, and so much more. We will double the number of interventionists and social workers working on the initiative and expand it city-wide. Commander Ware will talk a little bit about the progress he and Commander Jeffrey made in zones 4 and 5, but we look to expand this to other zones throughout the city. These interventionists, along with interventionists funded by the city at the Columbus Urban League and Community for New Direction, will make real proactive change in our community. In a few moments, Commander Weir and Marin Stuckey from the CARE Coalition will talk about what their work will look like going forward. We heard from faith leaders about taking lessons learned from our work with Celebrate One and the community health workers that serve that initiative, and thinking about the same sort of approach for young people, particularly young people and their families in crisis. And so Marion will talk a little bit of how the CARE Coalition is going to lead that work proactively. Many of you know that Safe Streets, CPD's summer bicycle patrol unit, has had amazing success in reducing crime and building police-community relations in the Hilltop, Linden, and Southside. Because of its success, we're expanding it to include first shift in addition to the second shift. Primarily, it's been second shift and started primarily and lasted during the summer. We're going to start it in April, and we're going to have both first and second shift presence in these neighborhoods, and we're going to expand it throughout the fall. We think this is a great tool to build police-community relations, but also help with deterrence of crime and violence in our neighborhoods, particularly in these areas. I'm also expanding Safe Neighborhoods. This is an intervention program developed by renowned criminologist David Kennedy. Right now, the program is focused on individuals, those on parole from violent offenses, and provides significant social services as an alternative plan for one of crime and violence. In previous years, Safe Neighborhoods has had 0 recidivism. Think about that. None of those who completed the program were arrested for new gun-related charges. We're applying this strategy to groups now involved in violence because we know the impact a group can have on individuals. Safe Neighborhoods will be housed at 3 churches throughout the community. We will start the implementation of this enhanced group violence intervention in April. A couple of these key priorities would not be possible without the advocacy and championing of this from our safety chairman, Mitch Brown. The group violence intervention I've just described and the End the Violence program were top priorities for Chairman Brown during our budget process. And now it is my honor to introduce him virtually and have the chairman speak to to these two initiatives and the End the Violence program. Chairman Brown?
Thank you, Mayor. On behalf of Council President Hardin and my council colleagues, I'd like to start by thanking Mayor Ginther for his partnership and his work to think innovatively about how we address the violence in our community. The tragic, senseless loss of life Columbus has experienced over the past 14 months cannot be overstated. While many speculate about the cause of the uptick in violence seen in major cities around the country, I am more focused on a safer path forward for all of our residents, especially young people of color. Mostly young men are falling prey to this violence at an alarming rate. Even more concerning is that they are victims of other young people from within the community. We can all get caught up in looking at the number of homicides and shootings as statistics, but each of those numbers is a loved one of someone in the community. I agree with the moms and dads and brothers and sisters and neighbors and friends that have experienced loss in these past 14 months. It is my motivation to strive for new and innovative ways to curb violence. We must treat each other or treat each of these tragic incidents as an individual, analyzing the people and the factors involved in these cases to better understand how to prevent them. No one entity can solve the problem alone, but the Division of Police must be an integral part of our solution. Included in this year's budget, City Council has funded programs to support officers and prevent violence before it occurs. These programs will not replace dedicated, well-intentioned law enforcement, but will integrate innovative strategies to make our neighborhoods safer. Through the Reimagining Safety Fund, Council has allocated $250,000 to the National Network of Safety Communities and Professor David Kennedy to conduct a study into group violence in Columbus and provide insights on how to address it. In addition, Council has provided $500,000 in partnership with End the Violence, led by Sean Stevenson, to enhance the Credible Messengers program. This nationally recognized program utilizes individuals in our community with criminal and social backgrounds that relate to the young people most likely to commit violent crimes. The goal is to intervene before a young person makes a life-altering decision. It is important to think of these young people as just that, young people who need guidance and direction, as most of us do. This program allows us as a community to engage individuals with similar experiences to develop relationships and divert young people down a safer, more productive path. The Credible Messengers program is an opportunity for us as a community to forgive and empower those who have often been disqualified to make a positive impact on their communities. The key to our success is curbing this violence relies on role models. You've heard the statement before, and I'm a strong advocate. Parenting, mentors, siblings, teachers, coaches, church leaders, and police officers. Our credible messengers are our best hope at reaching these young people before it is too late. To all the young people that may be watching, there is hope. There is hope for a safe and comfortable life without violence. We as Black people must find the strength to love and respect one another. Put the guns down and listen to one another. We need you. You are our future. We can do better. Some of the programs associated with the End of Violence will be teaching young people how to save a life, not take a life. CPR, wound care, the administration of Narcan, when those things are necessary. Again, on behalf of Council President Hardin and my council colleagues, thank you for the opportunity to participate today, Mayor, at today's press conference. We must continue this work to save lives and build a safer community for everyone. Thank you for having me, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Brown. I think our next speaker will be Commander Smith-Weir. Commander Weir.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Brown. I appreciate you having me. We'd like to talk a little bit about the reroute program. We've been working on it for 6 months now. We've had a limited success with it in a very small sample size. So as we move forward, we're talking about expanding that throughout the city and working with our partners with the CARE Coalition through CPH and with Department of Recs and Parks with the city. So as we confronted the problem about gun violence in the Linden area on Zone 4 and the Near East Side on Zone 5, we saw that we had approximately 30 to 40% of our shooting victims, homicide victims, were people in the age group of 14 to 23, or up to the age of 23. In addition, we've had just an explosion of gun violence and gun seizures throughout that same time. I think since October 1st, the Division of Police has arrested 267 individuals under the age of 23 or under in the city. Only 28 of those 267 guns were stolen, which means that a lot of those guns were given to those individuals, were purchased legally or purchased through a straw purchaser. So obviously, gun safety and gun security is of the utmost importance. We've seen an explosion in terms of gunshots throughout the city. Through ShotSpotter, we know that in the 3 regions that we have throughout the city that detect gunshots, October 1st to March 8th, 4,183 incidents of gunfire in the city in those regions, 15,852 rounds. Last year, during that same time period, in 2019 to early 2020, we only had 2,138 incidents with 7,619 rounds. So we've seen an explosion in the number of shots fired in those regions, obviously Hilltop, Linden, and the Near East Side, South Side. So those are all concerning. So what do we do about that? There's long-term solutions, short-term solutions. As we're going through and working with CARE Coalition and Reroute, we found, meeting weekly with them, Commander Jeffrey and I, found that we're talking about the same individuals over and over. We would talk to some, Parks and Rec and CARE Coalition, they would bring up a name, we were like, that's already on our list to talk about. So we're hearing about the same individuals. We're obviously, the communities are all talking to us about the same people that are going through trauma, that are going through, problems, that are experiencing issues. So one of the things that we got out of that is that we all need to pull in the same direction. One city, all different departments, different roles, but we're pulling in the same direction. So as we kind of built the model for what we're doing on the police side of it, we talk about people, places, and behaviors that we need to look at. In terms of people, we look at incident reports. We look at people that have been victimized out of violent crime, people that have been witnesses to violent crime, because studies show and evidence shows that those people that are experiencing trauma are more likely to take part in that trauma, be a victim of it, or be a suspect in it down the road. So as we identify those people, we're talking to the CARE Coalition, we're talking to Parks and Rec, and they're going out and conducting those interventions, the micro-interventions that the mayor alluded to. And as we've done that, Marion will talk about some of the successes that they've seen and some of the policies and the procedures that they're going through, and as they're building up their end of the model. But we've seen success with it. I can't tell you the amount of times we've had our officers that were working on the pilot program have said, we arrested this juvenile with a gun, and the mom came up to us at the scene and was upset. And they're not upset that we caught their child with a gun. They're upset because they've been trying to get their child on the right path, and they're struggling, and they need help. And the mom or the grandma is reaching out to us and saying, we need something. I've been trying to get through to the kid for months, years, whatever the case may be, and we're really struggling. And part of the success that we've seen with the program is the ability to then turn to our other partners and other stakeholders and say, this is the mom we talked to, this is how to get a hold of her, and they're able to connect them with services. So that's really been something that we think is we can duplicate, that we can build upon. And it hasn't been all successes. Obviously, we're still going through a lot as a city. But I think as we move forward, that's going to be the model that we're going to try to expand upon. And obviously, not every person takes up the services. Not everybody's accepting of that. And when they're not, and they continue to commit violent crimes, then there's going to be an enforcement aspect to it. And we're going to be, we know who they are. We've been hearing about them out on the street. We're taking reports about them. And if they choose over and over again to not not accept that olive branch, that helping hand that's been offered to them, at some point, then we're going to be doing enforcement action. We're going to be investigating them, and we're going to take action, whether that's a charge or whether that's an arrest or what that looks like. We'll be working with our partners with the courts. So we're really looking at that demographic of individuals up to 23 to 25 years old, because studies show that that is the person that is going to be most likely to be a victim of or a suspect in the violent crime. And that is it. And the next person up is our cohort at the CARE Coalition, Marion Stuckey. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Commander Weir. The work of CARE over the years has allowed us to be there for families, oftentimes after experiencing the most devastating loss, the loss of a child. Our work has included outreach to families after homicides and remembrance vigils. This is a space that we do all we can to be a resource and a source of support in, again, any way that we can. But the reality is there's only so much that can be done after a circumstance such as that. Loss by homicide presents a very unique sense of trauma. It's an intense sense of trauma and grief. Unlike other forms of death, the sudden and unexpected nature of this loss, as well as deep feelings of what could I have done differently, how could I have made change, really impact the family. And preventing this type of loss has become the utmost priority for my team and the Rec and Parks team. And by forming a close partnership, we have been able to shift to not only working post-homicide, but also to create more opportunities to a young person who may be in need of help. The opportunity to do more to prevent violent loss and shootings of young people with the expansion of Reroute is something that the CARE Coalition and Rec and Parks really takes to heart. That comes from seeing firsthand the long and difficult journey that families go through during the healing process. A journey that is never linear. It has ups and downs because the grief process continues on and on. But by working directly with families and doing what we can, we do something called relentless outreach ahead of time to try to make daily contact with young people through Reroute. We've been able to see many positive strides and show them that there is another way. Essentially, doing all that we can to avoid seeing another loss, to avoid helping another family through another homicide. We recognize that violence is complicated. It has many root causes. Our lens is that the cycle of violence includes people that have experienced their own pain and suffering in many different forms. And this includes from poverty, exposure to community violence, and sometimes even being victims of abuse themselves. As a result of this exposure, they're more likely to be involved in unsafe behavior themselves. To put it very simply, when someone is hurting, they are more likely to hurt other people. Rec and Parks and CARE has been working together to provide a continuum of interventions with young people, and that spans all the way from working directly with the young person to communities as well. And it involves supporting communities with community-driven approaches. With this expansion, we can further the direct outreach that we have been involved in. This will be in the community doing door-to-door outreach, but this time providing outreach before a homicide, utilizing data to inform where we will be. We will work one-on-one with neighbors to address their social needs, recognizing that if basic needs are not fulfilled, human nature propels anyone to get those needs met by any means necessary. That includes things like food and housing, but also connection and positive attention. Our plan will be to reach double the number of homes and provide weekly presence in our focus areas. Our focused approach centers around relationship building and understanding the unique needs of those that we work with. This expansion will allow us to do in-depth work to support the healing of families and communities that have experienced repeated trauma, and serves as a reminder to all of us that when trauma is present, survival mode takes over, and behaviors and actions often reflect this. Our work will include both families and community interventions with the belief that by providing more awareness of the impact of trauma, Also supporting a collaborative, creative process that is community-led, that change is possible. This work centers on making sure that needed resources are available and immediately giving access to pro-social activities and access to things like jobs. We will be able to hear from and uplift the voices of those who are most impacted and to get to the resilience and hope that is inherently there, but sometimes underneath years and years of pain. This will happen through a block-by-block approach with additional staff and residents, and with the support of our city leadership. We will be able to provide support to families who are navigating sometimes generation of hardships to provide opportunities for change. We will no longer just react to violence. We will now have the resources to be proactive in supporting and serving families and communities that have suffered for far too long. We will consistently be able to provide wraparound services where in the past our capacity limited us. In time, and with focus and increased capacity, we are certain that we can see positive change. It's now my pleasure to introduce Pastor Graves.
Thank you, Mayor, for inviting me to be a part of this conversation. My name is Alyssa Graves. I'm a pastor at Central City Church, and I live in the Franklinton neighborhood, and just this year lost a friend to gun violence. Luke chapter 19, verse 41 through 42 says, "As he approached Jerusalem and saw the city, he wept over it and said, 'If you, even you, had only known on this day what would bring you peace.'" Peace is not just the absence of violence, but peace, as Jesus talked about and has talked about in other monotheistic faiths, is the word shalom, meaning wholeness on all levels, individual, relational, community, and global wholeness. Peace, everything made right and all things complete. This is the longing for us in our city, for our neighborhoods. And as we stand here today, we remember all those who have died in our city because of violence, all those who have lost trust or a sense of safety, and all those who are the product of violence. And we weep as Jesus weeps. We know that these programs and initiatives are not perfect, but as we work and pray, we have hope that God will use us, use our neighbors, use our community leaders and organizations to bring about wholeness in this city. So let's pray. Holy God, the one who weeps with us, hear our cry for this city. Answer us, O Lord, and turn to us. Give us your comfort, give us your wisdom, and give us your guidance. Another brutality, another killing, another grief beyond telling, as we know that hurting people hurt people. We remember now those who are victims of violence and those who are perpetrators. We see the faces of the youth in our city who are surrounded by violence and influenced by violence. We feel the pain of the families who have lost through death or through prison. And we hear the cries of your people for peace, for justice, for respite, and for wholeness. So we pray, move powerfully in our body politic. Move us towards peaceableness that does not want to hurt or to kill. Move us toward justice, that the troubled and the forgotten may know mercy. Move us toward forgiveness, that we may escape the trap of revenge. And empower us to turn our weapons into acts of mercy and of justice. You are the God who has set us in families and clans and tribes, in communities and in cities. We give you thanks this day that you are Lord of this city and all cities. And we pray for this city today and 1,000 other cities going through the same things. In all our cities this day, there will be crime and sharp money making, and there will also be compassion and forgiveness and generosity and regulations about justice and injustice. So come, O God, and heal all that is broken in our lives, in our streets, and in our world, and make us whole. We pray this in the name of the one who wept over the city. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Graves, and to all of our speakers for joining us here today and engaging in the roundtables and helping to guide some of these changes that we've made. Really appreciate your time and service. We all know that our young people suffered the most when it came to the pandemic. In-person school for all students will be a step in the right direction. But in the coming weeks, I will also unveil some of the most significant investments that the city has ever made into summer and youth programming. It appears as if the President's Rescue Plan will move forward out of Congress today. That will provide unprecedented resources that we can invest in the restoration of our young people. The disparity of the impact of the COVID recession have never been more clear. 60 Minutes documented it just Sunday evening. Our black and brown neighbors have been so severely, disproportionately negatively impacted by this COVID recession. And now we will have additional resources to invest in our young people and our families to help ensure that we have a dynamic and inclusive recovery where they can be safe in the months and years ahead. We won't be doing it alone. I'll be partnering with the county, with the private sector, so many of our other youth service providers to make this investment. And I know full well it won't be just this summer. I would be naive and reckless in my duty to suggest that we're going to make up in just a few months what's happened to our young people just in the last year, but over the last several years. We have a long way to go to stop the violence here in Columbus. This will not be the last press conference I have to address the crisis. But I'm confident that these steps, formed by data, evidence, and the community, will help reverse the violent trend we are seeing. Be happy to take questions from the press at this time.
Mayor Ginther, we've had 5 of these press conferences before. What's different now? What can you say to the community to say that this is going to be what stems the tide?
I think you heard a lot about why we think that these enhancements and new initiatives will make a difference. And there's a lot of data to support that. You know, obviously, the Safe Neighborhoods program has been very, very successful. Safe Streets has been very successful. Reroute has had a significant impact in a short period of time in a very limited part of our city. And so doubling the number of interventionists at Recreation and Parks and Marion's team at Columbus Public Health, working with the commanders in the other zones, I think we can have an even greater impact. So having this balanced, comprehensive approach, changing and adapting parts of the comprehensive neighborhood safety strategy that have to change. The violence, and I think the commander spoke to this, the violence we're seeing today is very different than what we saw in 2017. And so we have to adapt that strategy, enhance and expand some programs, and try some new things. This Growing Up partnership with the Men of Linden is something new and different, but based on what we're seeing and what they're seeing and experiencing, and entering into this partnership that Chairman Brown talked about within the violence. These are different types of approaches and initiatives that we think will help us stem the tide and make our entire community and neighborhood safer. Yes?
Mayor, a lot of these programs won't get kicked off for a couple of months and they'll take time to put into effect anyway. A lot of the juveniles who are committing these violent acts wouldn't participate anyway. So what are you going to do today to make sure we don't have 3 more homicides over the weekend, another 14-year-old who's shot in the head in a Walmart parking lot?
Well, obviously, a lot of the things that we talked about will actually start right away. I mean, you know, we're going to begin implementation going from the safe neighborhoods to this group violence intervention in the coming weeks. Marion and Mario with interventionists and Care Coalition will start ramping up their staffing immediately. The partnership with End the Violence and Growing Up in Linden, all those things will start right away. The expansion of the reroute program with the Division of Police Health and Recreation and Parks is going to start right away. So we believe that this, in addition to the additional investments that I'll be announcing in the coming weeks, particularly focused on young people, are going to be important. But I guess really specific to your question, that's why this partnership with the courts, the juvenile court judges, the mayors and law enforcement in the community is going to be so important, because we have to figure out a better way of dealing with young people that are committing crimes and in some cases getting more and more dangerous. We know that we're all interested in the same thing, neighborhood safety. And so working with those juvenile judges, the diversion and intervention programs that have worked, and maybe additional resources that the city, the county, the private sector can put into those, and then having the judges use those to make sure young people get on the right track. Yes?
You talk about those diversion programs. What has the response been from the city managers and the mayors that you've spoken with about this?
Very much interested in working together with the courts. I was just with the group on Friday. We have our monthly meeting of Central Ohio mayors and city managers, and had at least a half a dozen of the mayors and city managers raise their hand and want to work with me on this, and the judges, obviously law enforcement, the prosecutor's office, so that we can address this issue moving forward.
A couple of months ago, we were in this room, you mentioned started those new programs, the initiatives for families and kids at risk. Since then, we've seen a spike in violence involving kids. What was it about those programs that did not work, and how do you believe these new initiatives will work?
Well, I think there's a whole variety of things. As we talked about, there are a number of things that we started last year that have shown great promise, and I think the commander and Marion have spoken to those today, and that's why we're expanding them and adding more staffing to those programs so that we reach more families and expand it into different zones throughout the city. I think this is a very complex problem. This is why cities are facing it around the country. I think the lack of access to in-person education, the disparity that exists with access to high-quality virtual instruction, no extracurricular activities, recreation centers. Our young people are feeling isolated. They're depressed. They're disconnected, and they don't see a future for themselves in this community. And so this comprehensive approach that we've announced today, expansion of existing programs that are showing promise, investing in new initiatives that we haven't before, and the complement that I shared that we'll be sharing in the next few weeks with the most significant investment that the city, and my hope is with the collective community that we're going to make in young people in our history, and knowing that that has to be an ongoing, sustained effort for us to see the neighborhood safety that we want to exist throughout our community. Yes?
Yes, hi, Mayor. What would, as far as recruitment for these programs, look like? Is the city working with these programs to recruit people that look like the young people to help them through diverse, especially when it comes to diversity?
Marion, do you want to speak to how you'll go about recruiting maybe social workers for the Care Coalition? I think, police can speak to that as well, but, it's very, very important to me. As you know, the June police class is going to be the most diverse class in recent history for the city, and so the work that's been led by Lieutenant Smith-Hughes and the recruiting team at CPD and some of the great work that's been done there, we're very proud of. But Marion, do you want to speak a little bit to recruitment for the Care Coalition?
So one of our priorities has always been to make sure that the staff look like the communities that we serve. And so in the very beginning days of the Care Coalition, one of our targets was to hire individuals from the community to help inform our work. So we have strived to continue to do that, hiring individuals from Linden and Hilltop who understand and who recognize the unique situation and can really kind of speak to that moving forward. So we'll continue to do that. I would also say, as a CARE Coalition, we have a partnership of over 500 individuals from Central Ohio. And so we have partnerships with OSU College of Social Work, with Columbus State. We're working with them each and every day within our coalition and plan to continue to do so to make sure we can make sure that people look like those that we're serving.
Thank you, Mayor. I think the only thing I would add to that is, with some of the place-based initiatives, the Growing Up, the Men of Linden are going to target young men in Linden and partner them with older men that either live, worship, or work in the community. So it is going to be a very place-based approach there, and something that we're very mindful of. And the announcement around summer youth programming, it's also going to be probably the most robust summer youth employment effort. So build on some of the lessons learned. We used CARES dollars for neighborhood and community beautification last year, put young people to work, paid them a decent wage, and we saw a huge amount of benefit from that as well. So building on those lessons learned and things that we could expand this year. We know that if we give constructive, positive opportunities for young people to make money, gain skills, and being engaged with adults that care for them, we can make things safer for them and the entire community. Yes?
Mayor, in looking at the statistics from 2021's homicides, only one of the suspects that's arrested is under the age of 18 at this point. You talked a lot about the partnerships with juvenile court. Are there also going to be partnerships with municipal court and common pleas court so that these people that are outside the juvenile system's purview will still be able to access resources that they might need? And, we talk a lot about schools, they're outside of school age. How are we going to reach these young adults?
Yeah, I think that'll be a lot of the work. Absolutely, I'm committed to working with the judges and with the prosecutor's office on folks not just under the age of 18, but those younger adults. But that's going to be a real focus for both End the Violence and Growing Up, is really targeting maybe young people that, younger adults that are, approaching 18 or just past 18, but don't have meaningful living wage jobs and career opportunities to support them and their families in their neighborhoods. And so, absolutely, we don't view this just as a juvenile effort. I really think of our focus as being, comprehensively in where we're going to invest in that 14 to 24 age range. I'll come back around, Steve. Yeah.
Okay.
One more question. I know we've spoken today a lot about young people, but for some young people who are already incarcerated or already in jail, might be getting out soon, will there be some programs for them to help them kind of re-induct into society and stay out of trouble?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And, our hope is that, with the interventionists, the significant increase in interventionists and the social workers will help young people as they return to the community and re-enter our neighborhoods, that we're able to connect them with resources. I think the big thing that Marion shared today is that we've primarily been responding to incidents of violence in partnership with the police, and by the ramping up of staffing in health and recreation and parks, we can really put our teams on offense in reaching out to folks who they know are returning to the community and neighborhoods to try to get them on the right track from the beginning, and working with even adults. This is their work. The CARE Coalition and APPS isn't focused primarily on people under the age of 18. It's really for folks who are out in the community, but really thinking about that 14 to 24 age range for our comprehensive strategy. Steve?
I was just going to ask, you have hard dates when it comes to the Men of Linden and the violence, when these programs with them will actually begin and when they'll start working with kids on the street?
I think we're going to start implementation immediately, and enter into those contracts as quickly as possible. But they understand the sense of urgency. I'll make sure Kate or Robin follow up with specific dates of when they'll start.
So they won't have to wait when the money starts.
That's correct.
Okay, good.
We're ready to roll.
Is there any consideration to adding more homicide or assault squad detectives? CPD consistently says those who are suspected of shooting or shooting and killing someone is more likely to reoffend. Any thoughts on adding to those units?
Well, I know Chief Woods has already announced some changes and made some changes within the division And obviously, I'm always open to recommendations and input from Chief Woods on things we need to do, but would really rely on, recommendations and insight from him on that, if there's going to be a shifting of resources or adding additional.
And where do things stand on the search for the new police chief?
We're in process. The posting's gone up, right, effective yesterday. And so we've got a robust process that's underway. I've been calling folks from around the country, talking to mayors, law enforcement professionals, community leaders, trying to encourage people to apply. I think we're going to have a very strong, robust group to consider because I've been very clear about what we're looking for. I am only considering external candidates. We're looking for a transformational leader that's going to help lead changing the culture within the division. And the calls I've had with many folks around the country have been very promising. Yes?
Sorry. Can you discuss what you know about the fatal officer-involved shooting from 270 on Friday?
Well, I think it's really important when I see footage and see things that don't meet my or the community's expectations and call them out, as I did in the killing of Andre Hill, that when there are incidents that we see that take place where our officers made a valiant and heroic effort and appear, based on everything I know and seen, the individual who was shot and killed did not want to be taken into custody that day. Drove the wrong way on the freeway, put potentially hundreds of lives at risk with shooting and everything I've seen and heard. It could have been a much more dangerous and deadly day on Friday had law enforcement not done what they did, followed their training and expertise, working with everyone, and having those body-worn cameras on so that we had the evidence that I know we released to the public yesterday to reinforce, that transparency, that accountability and oversight. So it's critically important for me to praise and lift up our officers when they have to make very difficult decisions that have life and death consequences, if I'm going to call them out when they don't meet our expectations as well. We'll hang around for a few minutes. If you have any other questions, we'll be happy to take them. Thanks, everybody.